The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched high above the assembled delegates. Crystalline walls reflected light from a dozen different suns. Ambassador G1 stood at the center platform, her hands clasped behind her back. Around her, representatives from 40 different species watched with varying degrees of interest. G-1 had prepared for this moment for months. Earth wanted to join the Galactic Defense Coalition. She needed to convince them that humanity deserved a place among the stars. Honored Council, G1 began, her voice steady. Humanity requests membership in the coalition. We offer our ships, our people, and our commitment to galactic peace. A massive reptilian figure rose from the front row. Commander Vex, of the Vrax Empire, towered over most beings in the chamber. His scales gleamed like polished bronze, and his yellow eyes fixed on G1 with something like amusement. "We have reviewed your military records, human," Vexter said. His voice rumbled through the hall. Very interesting reading. G1 felt a knot form in her stomach. She knew what was coming. Vexter activated a holographic display. Images flickered to life above the assembly. In the last century alone, your species has signed 47 peace treaties. You have dismantled enough weapons to arm a small fleet. Your young people march in the streets, demanding an end to conflict. He paused, his head tilting. You even created something called the Department of Peace Studies at your universities. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The crystalline Keth delegates chimed softly to each other. The warrior Casthurians shifted in their seats, their forearms crossing in what might have been disapproval. These are accomplishments we are proud of, G1 said carefully. Humanity has learned the value of peace, or the weakness of fear, a Thurian general called out. Laughter rippled through parts of the assembly. Captain Hyanwu stood in the observation deck above the main chamber. He wore his uniform perfectly pressed, every metal in its proper place. But his jaw was tight as he watched the proceedings below. Beside him, young Marine Tamin clenched his fists. They think we're cowards, Tamin muttered. Let them think what they want. Hyanwu replied quietly. Down in the chamber, Vexter continued. The coalition needs warriors, Ambassador G1. We face threats that would make your peace marchers run screaming. The swarm does not negotiate. The raiders do not sign treaties. They kill and they take, and they move on. We understand the reality of the threats you face. Do you? Vexter leaned forward. Because your military history suggests otherwise. Every war you have fought, you ended with apologies. Every victory, you celebrated with guilt. This is not the mindset of a warrior species. A Keth delegate spoke, its voice like wind chimes. Perhaps the humans could serve in support roles. Medical assistance. Supply logistics. They need not face combat directly. G1 opened her mouth to protest, but Vexter was already nodding. An excellent suggestion. Humans are clearly unsuited for frontline duty, but every military needs support staff. The vote came swiftly. Humanity was accepted into the Galactic Defense Coalition with strict limitations. No combat roles. No command positions. Support and medical services only. G1 bowed to the assembly, her face carefully neutral. Humanity accepts these terms. We will serve however the coalition requires. As the session ended, Hyanwu made his way down to meet G1 in the corridor outside. She looked tired, older than her years. They gave us janitor duty, she said flatly. We expected this might happen, Hyanwu replied. Did we? G1 shook her head. I showed them our peace initiatives thinking they would see wisdom, restraint. Instead, they saw weakness. Maybe they need to see weakness, Hyanwu said quietly. For now. G1 looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean that sometimes it is better to be underestimated. Haiyan Wu glanced around the corridor, then lowered his voice. We know what humans are capable of in war. Our ancestors knew. That is why we built all those peace treaties and disarmament protocols. Not because we are weak, but because we are strong. Too strong. You sound like you want them to find out the hard way. I do not want anything except to serve, Haiyan Wu said. But the galaxy is dangerous. Eventually, circumstances will show them the truth. Back on the human flagship Indomitable, Tamin gathered with other young Marines in the recreation bay. The news of the Council's decision had spread quickly through the human fleet. Support rolls, one Marine spat. They want us to hand out bandages while they play soldier. The Thurians have never lost a battle, another Marine said. The Vraks conquered half the sector. Maybe they have earned the right to look down on us. Or maybe they have just never faced real opposition, Tamin said. Everyone turned to look at him. Think about it. When was the last time the Thurians fought someone as advanced as they are? They stomp on primitive species and call themselves warriors. The Vraks use overwhelming numbers. But humans? We have fought ourselves for thousands of years. We have fought enemies with the same weapons, the same intelligence, the same desperation. What is your point? Someone asked. My point is that they are about to learn something important, Tamin said. You do not fear battle because you are weak. You fear battle because you know exactly what it costs and what it requires. The room fell silent. Outside the viewport, stars drifted past in the endless dark. Somewhere out there, the galaxy turned. Unaware that its understanding of humanity was about to change forever, Haiyan Wu stood on the bridge of his ship, looking at the same stars. His executive officer, a woman named Bora, approached quietly. The crew is upset about the Council's decision, she said. I know. Some of them want to prove the aliens wrong. They will get their chance, Haiyan Wu said softly. War always comes. And when it does, the galaxy will learn why humanity tried so hard to avoid it. He did not sound happy about it. He sounded sad, like a man who knows a terrible secret and wishes he did not. The emergency beacon from Threshold 7 reached the Galactic Defense Fleet at 040 hours. Commander Vexthur assembled his forces immediately. 20 warships, including 5 human support vessels, jumped to hyperspace within the hour. Captain Haiyan Wu stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as they dropped out of hyperspace near the colony. What he saw made his blood run cold. Threshold 7 was burning. The colony housed nearly 2 million beings, mostly civilians. Families, children. Now, strange organic ships swarmed around the planet like insects around a corpse. The swarm had come. All ships, battle formation. Vexthur's voice crackled over the communication channel. Human vessels will remain at the rear. Prepare to receive wounded. Haiyan Wu exchanged a look with Bora. She shook her head slightly, but said nothing. Orders were orders. The Vraks and Thurian warships moved forward in tight formation. They looked impressive, Haiyan Wu had to admit. Massive vessels bristling with weapons. The Thurian warriors had never lost a battle. Everyone said so. The swarm attacked with horrifying speed. In the medical bay of the Indomitable, Subin prepared for casualties. She was the chief medical officer, a woman who had served in Earth's last conflict zones before joining the space program. She knew what war looked like, but she had never seen anything like the swarm. The first Thurian casualties arrived within minutes. Warriors who supposedly never felt fear came through the airlock screaming. Not from pain, from terror. What did this? Subin demanded as she worked on a Thurian soldier. The warrior had 4 arms, all of them trembling. They get inside your head, the soldier gasped. They show you things. Your worst fears. Your greatest shamans. They make you see it all while they kill you. Su Bin looked up at her human medical team. Every one of them wore the same calm expression. They worked efficiently, almost mechanically. While alien soldiers wept and shook, the humans simply did their jobs. On the flagship, Vexter watched his perfect formation fall apart. The swarm did not fight like any enemy he had encountered. They used psychological attacks. They made sounds that drove some species mad. They showed images that paralyzed others with fear. His warriors were breaking. The legendary Thurians retreating. The mighty Vrax fleeing in disorder. Human vessels, Vexter called, and Hyam-Woo heard the strain in his voice. Move forward. Assist with evacuation. Acknowledged, Hyam-Woo replied. Then, on a private channel to the other human ships, stay ready. This is going to get worse. He was right. Within an hour, the Galactic Defense Fleet was in full retreat. The swarm had pushed through every defensive line. They were landing on the planet now, moving through the colony streets. Hyam-Woo watched the evacuation feeds. Civilians ran in panic. The few remaining alien soldiers tried to hold checkpoints, but the swarm's psychological warfare broke them down. They would see the swarm coming and simply collapse, minds shattered by fear. Captain, Bauer said quietly, the main civilian shelter is surrounded. 10,000 people trapped inside. The galactic forces have abandoned the position. Hyam-Woo stared at the screen. He could see it happening in real time. The swarm moving toward the shelter. No one was coming to help. Request permission to deploy ground forces, Hyam-Woo said over the command channel. Denied, Vexter replied immediately. Human forces are not cleared for combat operations. There are 10,000 civilians, I said denied. Fall back to the evacuation zone. Hyam-Woo looked around his bridge. Every human officer was watching him, waiting. Marine Taman stood in the deployment bay with his unit. They had heard the entire exchange. The room was silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. We are not going to just watch, are we? Someone asked. Tae-Min checked his weapon one more time. No, he said simply. We are not. On the bridge, Hyam-Woo made his decision. He had spent his whole life following orders. He had trained at Earth's finest military academies. He understood the chain of command, but he also understood something the Galactic Council did not. Sometimes orders had to be broken. Ba'ora, he said quietly. How many other human captains do you think are watching those civilians die right now? All of them, sir. And how many of them are going to follow Vexter's orders to retreat? Ba'ora smiled grimly. None of them, sir. Hyam-Woo opened the channel to all human vessels. All ships, this is Captain Hyam-Woo. I am going to say something, and then I am going to give you an order. What you do with that order is your choice. As human commanders, you must make your own decisions. He paused, gathering his thoughts. We joined the coalition to help, to protect life. Right now, there are civilians dying because we are following orders that value protocol over lives. I cannot do that anymore. I will not do that anymore. All human vessels, Hyam-Woo said, his voice firm and clear. We are going in. The communication channel erupted. Vexter was shouting, demanding compliance. Other alien commanders were calling for Hyam-Woo's arrest, but underneath it all, Hyam-Woo heard something else. The acknowledgement signals from every human ship in the fleet. Indomitable acknowledges. Yorktown acknowledges. Seoul acknowledges. Daejeon acknowledges. One by one, every human vessel confirmed. They were going in. Tae-Min felt the ship change course. The deployment bay doors began to open. His unit locked their helmets and checked each other's gear with practiced ease. Remember your training, Taemin said to his Marines. We are not here to win glory. We are here to save lives. Stay focused. Stay calm. Do your job. The dropships launched into the chaos below. As they descended through the smoke and fire toward Threshold 7, Taemin looked at the faces of his fellow Marines. Not one of them looked afraid. Not one of them hesitated. And in that moment, Taemin realized something the Galactic Council had gotten completely wrong. Humans did not fear battle. They had simply learned to respect it, to control themselves within it. But control was not the same as inability, and respect was not the same as weakness. The galaxy was about to learn the difference. The dropships touched down in the war zone. Marines poured out, moving with swift precision toward the surrounded shelter. The swarm sensed them coming and turned to face this new threat. They tried their psychological attacks. They projected images of fear and death. The humans did not even slow down. Something was very different about these new arrivals. The swarm had broken every other species in the galaxy. But these humans just kept coming, their faces hidden behind helmets, their movements steady and purposeful. For the first time in its long and terrible existence, the swarm encountered something it did not understand: prey that refused to feel fear. Taemin moved through the ruined streets of Threshold 7 with his unit. The swarm had sensed their approach and sent a wave of attackers to meet them. The creatures were horrible to look at, all chitinous limbs and dripping mouths. They screamed sounds designed to paralyze prey with fear. Taemin raised his weapon and fired. Clean, precise, efficient. The swarm creature fell. 3 more took its place. Taemin's unit spread out automatically, each Marine taking position without needing orders. They had trained for scenarios like this 1,000 times. What the swarm tried next would have broken most species. They projected images directly into the Marines' minds. Taemin saw his worst childhood memory, his greatest failure, his deepest fear. He blinked once, pushed it aside, and kept firing. The human mind, shaped by millions of years of predator evolution, had learned to function under extreme stress. Fear existed, yes, but it did not have to control you. Humanity had spent thousands of years learning this lesson in the hardest way possible. On the Vrax flagship, Commander Vexter watched the human advance on his tactical display. He could not believe what he was seeing. "They are not slowing down," his tactical officer reported. "The swarm's psychological attacks are having no effect." "That is impossible," Vexter said. "Every species responds to fear. It is biological, unavoidable." But the humans kept advancing, not charging wildly like berserkers, not fleeing like prey. They moved with calculated precision, covering each other, using tactics that seemed almost surgical in their efficiency. Ambassador G1 stood beside Vexter, having been summoned to the flagship when the humans disobeyed orders. She watched the display with an expression Vexter could not quite read. "Explain this," Vexter demanded. "Your people were supposed to be afraid of battle, conflict-averse. These soldiers look like they were born for war." G1 was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was sad. "We are afraid of battle, Commander. We just are not afraid in the way you thought." "I do not understand. Let me show you something." G-Win activated a holographic display. "This is Earth. For most of our recorded history, we fought each other. Not occasionally, constantly. Humans fought humans with the same intelligence, the same weapons, the same desperation to survive. We evolved to fight beings exactly as smart as we are." Images flickered past. Ancient battles, modern wars, endless conflict. "We got very good at killing," G1 continued. "Too good. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We created tactics so efficient they horrified us. And we realized something important. We had to stop. Not because we could not fight, because we could fight too well." Vexter stared at the images. He saw human soldiers moving through combat zones with the same calm efficiency he was watching on Threshold 7. "You build all those peace treaties," he said slowly, "not because you feared your enemies." "No," G1 said quietly. "We built them because we feared ourselves. We feared what we become in war. Every human knows this. It is taught in our schools. We remember all wars not with pride, but with horror. Not because we lost, but because we won too easily. Because we were too efficient at destruction." On the ground, Taemin's unit reached the civilian shelter. The swarm had surrounded it completely. There were hundreds of the creatures, maybe thousands. "This is going to be messy," one of the Marines said over the comm. "Then we do it clean," Taemin replied. "Stick to the plan. No heroics, no risks. Just the job." What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for years to come. The human Marines did not charge. They did not spray fire wildly. Instead, they set up a perimeter and began a systematic elimination of every swarm creature within range. That it was not glorious. It was not exciting. It was methodical, efficient, and absolutely ruthless. The swarm tried every tactic in their arsenal. Psychological attacks, wave assaults, flanking maneuvers. Nothing worked. The humans adapted instantly to each new threat. Their thousands of years of warfare experience encoded in their tactics and training. Su-bin watched the battle feeds from the medical bay. More alien soldiers were arriving, wounded and traumatized. But the human casualties were remarkably light. Not because humans were invulnerable, but because they fought smart. How are they doing this? A Keth medical officer asked, its crystalline form chiming with confusion. "The swarm breaks everyone. How do humans resist?" Su-bin pulled up a neural scan of a human Marine. "See this? This is a human brain under combat stress. Fear response is active, yes. Adrenaline is flooding the system. But humans evolved with a prefrontal cortex that can override emotional response. We feel the fear, but we do not have to obey it. That seems like a dangerous adaptation." "It is," Savin agreed. "Very dangerous. Especially when turned against other humans. That is why we tried so hard to stop fighting. Because when you can ignore fear, when you can function through horror, you become very good at creating both." The civilian shelter doors opened. Taemin's unit had cleared the area. 10,000 civilians, representing a dozen different species, poured out to the evacuation ships. "Shelter secure," Taemin reported. "Moving to next objective." "Negative," came Haiyan Wu's voice over the comm. "Vexter is ordering all forces to fall back. The colony is lost." Taemin looked around at the burning city, at the civilians still trapped in buildings, at the swarm still advancing through the streets. "Sir, we can hold here. We can save more people." There was a pause. Then Haiyan Wu's voice came back, heavy with decision. "All human forces, continue operations. We will hold this colony until every civilian is evacuated." That is not a suggestion. That is an order. The human fleet moved into low orbit, providing fire support. Human Marines deployed to every civilian concentration point. They did not fight like the Thurians, seeking glory in single combat. They did not fight like the Vraks, relying on overwhelming numbers. They fought like humans, using terrain, setting traps, coordinating with ruthless efficiency. Every tactic was designed to minimize human casualties while maximizing enemy losses. It was, several observers noted with discomfort, like watching apex predators work. "They are hunting the swarm," a Thurian general whispered, watching the feeds. "Not fighting them, hunting them." And he was right. The humans had identified the swarm's command nodes and were systematically eliminating them. They had recognized the creature's attack patterns and developed counters. They adapted faster than the swarm could adjust. 6 hours after the humans disobeyed orders and deployed, Threshold 7 was secured. Every civilian had been evacuated. The swarm was in full retreat. It was the first time in recorded history that the swarm had been driven off a planet once they had established a foothold. Vexter stared at the tactical display in silence. Around him, alien commanders were equally quiet. They had just watched a species they had dismissed as weak accomplish what the galaxy's greatest warriors could not. G1 stood beside him still. "Do you understand now?" she asked gently. "You do not fear battle," Vexter said slowly. "You respect it. You understand its true cost. And that understanding makes you more dangerous than any warrior who loves war." "Yes," G1 said. "We know what we are capable of. That is why we built a civilization dedicated to peace. Not because we are weak, but because we are strong. Too strong. Strong enough to destroy ourselves if we are not careful." Vexter looked at her. "The Council made a terrible mistake." "Yes," G1 agreed. "You did. But perhaps it was a necessary one. Now you know the truth. The question is, what will you do with it?" The War Council convened 3 days after the Battle of Threshold 7. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council, once filled with confident alien commanders, now buzzed with nervous energy. Captain Hyomu stood in the same spot where Ambassador G1 had stood months before. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. This time, the galaxy was afraid. Holographic displays floated throughout the chamber, showing footage from the battle. Human Marines moving through combat zones with unsettling calm. Tactical maneuvers that seemed almost prescient in their efficiency. The systematic destruction of an enemy that had terrified the galaxy for generations. "This is unacceptable." A Thurian general slammed his 4 fists on the table. Humans disobeyed direct orders. They violated the chain of command. This cannot go unpunished. "They saved 10,000 lives," a Keth delegate chimed softly. "Lives we had abandoned. That is not the point." Vexter rose to his feet, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "They demonstrated combat capabilities they explicitly did not disclose when joining the coalition. We were deceived." G1 stepped forward. "We disclosed everything you asked for, Commander. You saw our peace treaties, our anti-war movements, our commitment to avoiding conflict. All of that was true. You simply misunderstood what it meant. You let us believe you were weak." "No," G1 said firmly. "You assumed we were weak. There is a difference. We told you we fear battle. That was the truth. We simply did not explain what we feared about it." A new display activated. Su Bin appeared on the screen, transmitting from the medical bay of the Indomitable. She had been asked to present her findings to the Council. "Honored delegates," Su Bin began, "I have been asked to explain human combat psychology. I will try to be brief." She pulled up a neural scan. This is a human brain during peaceful activity. Now, this is the same brain during combat. The differences were striking. Parts of the human brain lit up in ways that seemed almost alien. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Su Bin explained. We chase prey for days until they collapse from exhaustion. We evolved to ignore pain, to push through fatigue, to function under extreme stress. Other predators rely on strength or speed. Humans rely on endurance and determination. She pulled up another image. Now, add human intelligence to that. The ability to plan, to strategize, to learn from mistakes. Humans did not just hunt animals. For thousands of years, we hunted each other. We fought wars against enemies who were exactly as smart as we were, who had the same weapons, who wanted to survive just as badly. This created a feedback loop. Subin continued. We got better at war. Then our enemies got better. So we had to get even better. This went on for millennia. By the time we reached the space age, human military tactics had been refined by thousands of years of constant warfare. The council chamber was silent. Delegates watched the presentation with growing unease. But here's the important part, Subin said. About 200 years ago, we almost destroyed ourselves. We had weapons that could end all life on Earth. We came very close to using them. And in that moment, we realized something. We were too good at war, too efficient at killing. We had to stop. So you built your peace treaties, Baxter said quietly. Yes, we built institutions dedicated to avoiding conflict. We taught our children that war was a last resort. We created a culture that valued peace above victory, not because we could not fight, but because we understood exactly what fighting meant. A Vrax intelligence officer stood up. I have a question for Captain Hyanwu. Your soldiers showed no fear response to the swarm's psychological attacks. How is this possible? Hyanwu considered the question carefully. We felt fear. Every human on that battlefield felt fear. But humans have something else too. We can choose what to do with that fear. The swarm showed us our worst nightmares. But every human marine is trained to function through fear. It is part of our basic training. You train your soldiers to ignore fear. No, Hyanwu said. We train them to acknowledge fear and act anyway. There is a difference. Fear keeps you alert. Fear keeps you alive. But fear cannot be allowed to control your decisions. This is something humans learned long ago. The Thurian general who had spoken earlier stood up again. I watched the battle footage. Your tactics were brutal. Efficient, yes, but brutal. You showed no mercy to the swarm. The swarm shows no mercy to its victims, Hyanwu replied evenly. Should we have let them continue killing civilians while we debated philosophy? But the way you fought, it was cold, calculated, like machines, not living beings. Hyanwu's expression hardened. You think we enjoyed it? You think we took pleasure in killing? Every human on that battlefield knows the cost of what we did. We will remember those deaths for the rest of our lives. That is the burden we carry. We can be efficient killers, yes, but we also must live with what we have done. G1 added, this is what you do not understand. A species that loves war will eventually destroy itself. A species that fears war will be destroyed by others. But a species that understands war, that respects its terrible necessity while hating its cost, that species can survive. That is what humans are. The debate raged for hours. Some delegates argued that humans were too dangerous to be trusted with combat roles. Others pointed out that humans had just accomplished what the galaxy's greatest warriors could not. Finally, a young strategist named Minji was brought before the council. She was barely 30 years old, but she had designed the tactical approach used at Threshold 7. Honored Council, Minji said nervously. I have been asked to present a strategic assessment of the swarm threat. She activated a star map. Red markers indicated swarm activity across the sector. The swarm is regrouping. Our intelligence suggests they are preparing a massive assault on the galactic core. If they succeed, they will control the heart of galactic civilization. Everything we have built will fall. Murmurs of alarm spread through the chamber. I have developed a defensive strategy, Minji continued. But I must warn you, it is aggressive. Some might say too aggressive. She pulled up tactical displays. We cannot wait for the swarm to attack. We must hit their staging areas now, disrupt their command structure, force them to fight on our terms. This is madness. A delegate shouted. We would need to strike deep into swarm territory. The casualties would be enormous. Actually, Minji said quietly, if we use human tactics, casualties would be minimal. But the psychological cost to our forces would be high. This is not a strategy for warriors who seek glory. This is a strategy for soldiers who want to win and go home. Several alien delegates stood up and walked out. The plan was too ruthless, too cold, too human. But Vexter remained seated. He had seen what human tactics could accomplish. He had watched his own forces break while humans held firm. How certain are you that this plan will work? He asked. 80%, Minji replied. If we implement it fully, if we are willing to do what is necessary. Vexter looked around the chamber, at the delegates who had stayed, at the footage still playing on the displays, showing humans fighting with terrible efficiency. The council must decide, he said heavily. Do we give humans full combat authority? Do we trust them with this? G1 stepped forward one last time. Let me be clear about what you are really asking. You want to know if humans will become like the swarm, if we will use our capabilities for conquest instead of defense. That is your real fear. No one denied it. I cannot give you guarantees, G1 said. Humans are capable of terrible things. We know this because we have done terrible things to each other. But we also built a civilization dedicated to preventing those things. We chose peace when we could have chosen war. We chose restraint when we had the power to dominate. That is who we are. The vote, when it came, was close. But it passed. Humans would be granted full combat authority. Captain Haiyan Wu would be promoted to fleet commander. The coming battle would test whether the galaxy's faith in humanity was justified. As the council adjourned, Vexter approached Haiyan Wu. I hope we have not made a terrible mistake. So do I, Haiyan Wu replied honestly. So do I. The swarm came like a dark tide across the stars. Intelligence had been correct. This was their largest invasion fleet ever assembled. Thousands of bioships, each one carrying millions of the creatures. Their target was clear, the galactic core, home to the Council worlds and the heart of galactic civilization. Fleet Commander Haiyan Wu stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, now serving as the coalition flagship. Around him, officers from a dozen different species worked at their stations. It had taken weeks to integrate the combined fleet, but they had done it. All ships report ready, Baora announced. Human, Vrax, Therian, Keth. Everyone is in position. Haiyan Wu studied the tactical display. The swarm fleet was massive, but it was also predictable. They relied on overwhelming numbers and psychological warfare. Against most species, that had been enough. Execute Minji's plan, Haiyan Wu ordered. Phase 1 begins now. Across the fleet, human tactical officers began coordinating with their alien counterparts. This was the real test. Not whether humans could fight, but whether they could teach others to fight like humans. On the Therian warship Valor's Edge, Marine Taemin stood with a mixed unit of human and Therian soldiers. The Therians towered over the humans, their forearms carrying weapons twice the size of standard issue. Remember what we practiced, Taemin said, addressing the Therians. The swarm will try to get in your head. They will show you things that make you afraid. Do not fight the fear. Accept it. Let it sharpen your focus instead of breaking your concentration. A young Therian warrior named Krogan spoke up. This is difficult for my people. We are taught that fear is weakness. That a warrior must never show fear. Fear is not weakness, Taemin replied. Fear is information. It tells you that danger is present. What you do with that information determines whether you are weak or strong. The Therians looked uncertain, but they nodded. They had seen what humans could do. If this was how humans fought, they would try to learn. The swarm fleet entered engagement range. Immediately, their psychological attacks began. Across the Coalition fleet, screens flickered with horrifying images. Sounds echoed through ship corridors, designed to induce panic. On the Vrax flagship, Commander Vexter felt his scales crawl with instinctive fear. But he forced himself to breathe slowly, the way the human advisors had taught him. Fear was information. It was not control. "All ships, maintain formation," he ordered, keeping his voice steady. "They are trying to break us before the battle even begins. Do not give them that victory." Human officers throughout the fleet monitored their alien colleagues, ready to provide support. But they did not need to take over. The other species were holding. "They are learning," Su Bin observed from her medical station. She was monitoring the biometric data from non-human crew members. "Look at the Keth. Their resonance frequencies are elevated, indicating stress, but they are not fragmenting. They are functioning through it. Because they understand it now," Ji-Won said. She had taken a position as civilian advisor to the fleet. "They understand that fear does not mean failure. Every species feels fear. Humans just learn to work with it instead of being controlled by it." The first phase of the battle began. Rather than meeting the swarm head-on, the Coalition fleet executed a series of precise strikes against the enemy command nodes that Minji had identified. Human ships led each strike group, with alien vessels providing support. It was not glorious. It was not heroic. It was surgical and efficient. "Target destroyed," came the report from one strike group. "Moving to next objective. Second target destroyed. Third target is heavily defended. Send support to Group 3, Hyan Wu ordered. But maintain the schedule. We cannot let them regroup." The swarm tried to adapt, but they were fighting an enemy that adapted faster. Every time they shifted tactics, the Coalition was already responding. The humans had analyzed hundreds of previous swarm battles and predicted their responses. But the real breakthrough came when the alien species started contributing their own innovations. The Keth discovered that their crystalline hulls could deflect the swarm's psychological attacks, making them ideal for leading assaults. The Thurians found that their natural aggression, when controlled and channeled, made them exceptional at close combat operations. "They are not copying us," Hyan Wu observed with satisfaction. "They are learning from us and adding their own strengths. This is what a real coalition looks like." In the thick of the battle, Tamin's mixed unit boarded a swarm command ship. The creatures swarmed them immediately, screaming their horrifying sounds. Tamin fired calmly. Beside him, Krogan did the same. The Thurian's forearms wielded his weapons with precision, not wild fury. "Good," Tamin said. "Stay focused. Clear the corridor section by section. I see my failure." Krogan shouted as the swarm projected visions into his mind. "I see my shame. And?" Tamin replied, still firing. "You can see it and still function. That is what makes you strong. Keep moving." Krogan pushed forward, fighting through the psychological assault. Around them, other Thurians did the same. They were learning the human way. Not to be fearless, but to be functional despite fear. The battle raged for 18 hours. It was brutal and exhausting. But slowly, inexorably, the Coalition fleet was winning. Not through superior firepower or overwhelming numbers, but through superior tactics and unbreakable determination. The swarm had never faced an enemy like this. Every species they had ever fought had broken under their psychological attacks. But these opponents were different. The humans had taught the others how to resist, how to fight smart instead of fighting scared. Finally, the swarm command structure collapsed. Without central coordination, their fleet began to fragment and retreat. For the second time in recorded history, the swarm had been decisively defeated. Hyan Wu stood on his bridge, watching the enemy withdraw. He felt no triumph, only exhaustion and relief. Around him, His crew looked the same. They had one, but they understood the cost. All ships, stand down from combat operations. Haiyan Wu ordered. Begin recovery and medical operations. Well done, everyone. The communication channel erupted with responses. Not just from human ships, but from the entire coalition fleet. For the first time, they had fought as one. 3 days later, the Galactic Council reconvened. But this time, the atmosphere was different. There was no fear, no suspicion. There was respect. Vexter stood to speak. His scales seemed duller than before, aged by the battle. But his eyes were clear. "I owe humanity an apology," he said simply. "We judged you based on what we wanted to see, not on what you were. We saw your peace treaties and assumed weakness. We saw your reluctance to fight and assumed cowardice. We were wrong." He turned to Haiyan Wu. "You do not fear battle. You respect it. You understand its costs in a way that we did not. And that understanding makes you better warriors than those of us who love war." G1 stepped forward. "The galaxy faces many threats. The swarm was just one. But I believe we have learned something important. No single species can stand alone. Humans have our strengths, but we also have our limitations. Working together, combining our different perspectives and capabilities, we are stronger than any of us could be separately." A Keth delegate chimed its agreement. "The humans taught us that fear is not weakness. That efficiency is not cruelty. That peace is not the absence of strength, but the control of it." The council voted unanimously. Humans would be granted full membership in the coalition, with no restrictions. Human officers would serve throughout the fleet. Human tactics would be taught at the military academies, but more importantly, a new understanding had emerged. The galaxy was not divided into warriors and weaklings. Every species had its own relationship with conflict. The key was learning from each other. Months later, Taemin stood in a training facility, teaching a class of mixed species recruits. Humans, Thurians, Keth, Vrax, all learning together. "Fear is not the enemy," he told them. "Fear is information. The real enemy is letting fear control you. Learn to work with it, and you become stronger than you ever imagined." Krogan, now one of his assistant instructors, added, "My people believed that warriors should never feel fear. The humans taught us something better. A warrior who feels fear and acts anyway is stronger than a warrior who feels nothing at all." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Haiyan Wu looked out at the stars. Bazora approached quietly. "The council wants you to speak at the military academy," she said, "about human combat philosophy." Haiyan Wu sighed. "What should I tell them?" "The truth," Baora suggested. "That we fear war because we are good at it. That we built peace because we understood what we were capable of. That strength without control is just destruction." They might not like that truth. They did not like it before either, Baora said with a slight smile. But they learned. Haiyan Wu nodded slowly. He thought about all the battles humanity had fought, the terrible wars of Earth's past, the peace that had come from understanding those costs. And now, teaching the galaxy the same lessons it was not a burden he wanted, but it was one he would carry, because that was what humans did. They carried the weight of difficult knowledge. They remembered the costs of war so that others would not have to learn through the same suffering. They were the species that had learned to respect battle precisely because they understood it so well.